Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Chris Karpes, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is kind of different. This is a different platform for me. This is probably like only the fourth time I've FaceTime in my whole life, man. I'm used to like the corded phones downstairs in the basement where you're laying on the ground and not have to worry about what the other people are seeing, what you're doing, whether you're dressed or anything, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of awkward. Like, what if I start to want to randomly pick my nose? But now I can see my reflection, so I guess it's just, I'll just be stuck looking at myself.
You could stare at yourself the whole time if you want. This is like FaceTime with steroids. I think we're actually technically in a broadcast studio, whatever that means. I don't even know what that means, but yeah, it's basically Zoom.
I have the face for radio, so it's perfect. So I don't know.
Yeah, you and me both, which is why I only publish the audio, Chris.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, so I guess we should mention that you and I met each other. It's been, what, a month and a half or so?
I think about that. Yeah, my days kind of run together as far as work, you know?
Yeah, no, I get it. So my wife and I were in New Orleans celebrating our 25th anniversary. We had been there just after we got engaged. It was the last time we were there, so it had been a minute. And then the last full day we're there, we're like, let's just go hang out, see what the day does for us. And my wife said that was the best part of her trip, hanging with the folks at the bar and you as the bartender. And
nice.
I think we have to start with, you asked me if I like golf because there's a giant screen by the bar. And I said, yeah, I follow golf. And you told me you were a Justin Thomas guy. And then we got into it. And I don't know how you transitioned to you playing 18 with a couple of kids that play in college. And then in front of you, can you tell that story?
Okay, so I'm playing out. I grew up in Vancouver, so culturally New Orleans is a little bit different. The whole South is a little bit different to me, as far as the way people act, and I don't know. And so I'm playing with these young kids. They're all college students and like college golfers, so they're playing really fast. So normal course etiquette for a golf meeting is you never go in groups of four. And if there's two or three, a group of two or three or one and behind you, and they keep rolling up on you in every tee box, and hey man, why don't you play through? I myself want people to play through because I don't like people breathing down my neck. I don't like feeling rushed. I don't need any excuse or any distraction at all for golf. I already suck enough as it is, right? So we roll up to about the 16th hole, and I've been playing up on them the whole time.
And Chris, you said four in front of you, but it was actually five, right?
Yeah, the group of five, which is terrible. Like, that just makes it even slower, and the ample opportunity, at least 5 tee boxes that we're waiting for them to tee off. That they could have been, hey, the guys want to play through. It was never like, oh, we didn't notice you, So on the 16th hole, there's a bathroom right there where you can go, and one of the guys in the group in front of me is like, hey man, how's it going? How's your game? I'm like, actually kind of sucks because you guys are a bunch of fucking assholes for not letting me play through. And he's like, well, what do you mean, man? There's a group of 5 in front of us too, man. So I'm like, well, they're equally as big assholes as you, and you guys should have let us play through. Now I'm playing a 5-hour round of golf when it should have taken like 3.5 because of you guys. Next thing you know, this more girthy fella, that a little bit probably later in his late 50s or something like that, he rolls up in his golf cart and he's like, what did you just say, boy? And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm at the level of confrontation that I don't really want, but I'm okay with, and I'm like, you need to just sit the fuck down, old man, or I'm going to boot that stupid look right off your face. So as I do that, I look over, and guy number 3 in the group, he's like, oh yeah, what the fuck did you say? And he punches me in the face. And so I take a step back, and he rolls his fists around like he's a boxer from like a 30s movie or something like that, some sort of pugilist, which automatically makes me think, okay, this dude doesn't even know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to fight at all. So I grabbed a hold of him, and I gave him a couple shots in the head. I'm left-handed. I got a couple nice soft ones in there, and next thing you know, it's all getting broken up. And I'm still kind of wanting to come at him, but I'm not at all because I'm 52 and holy shit, was getting in a fight a bad idea. I was like, oh, wow, I'm winded after like 5 seconds, all right, so sweet. But I still, I got to play that macho role. It's me and 4 dudes, 5 actually, Wow. So he's like, whoa, bro, holy shit, you're strong, man. Tries to give me a hug and like, hey, man. I'm like, what are you doing trying to pick a fight with a stranger and punch him in the face? What did you think was going to happen? So then I go back across on the other side of the green. All the youngsters, all they'd seen was like the tail end of it, me flailing around and wrestling around with like 3 dudes. And like, what the fuck? What happened? I'm like, I don't know, man. Let's just keep playing. I chipped the shot, put it in 2, and get like a bogey on the hole. and I got this big goose egg on my forehead, and I'm just like, these kids are like, wow. I'm like, well, hey man, worst case scenario, at least you got a good story to tell your friends. Sorry about that. And that was about how that went. Those kids were just like, and then we got to after the 18, and they're like, I told them to wait for me in the parking lot if we wanted to talk about it. And they're like, well, they didn't seem to wait. They sure seemed to take off pretty fast when you're one person. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess they didn't. I don't know. So that's about it.
So the listening audience can't see either one of us, but you showed me when we were down in New Orleans, you basically grabbed the guy by the collar, right? By the neck of his shirt, much like you would in a hockey game.
Yes, sir.
Because I imagine since you're from Vancouver, you may have picked up a few moves punching while on skates on ice.
I actually never really learned how to skate very well. I'm one of those anomalies. Hockey's really expensive and really time consuming. And my parents always told me that I was too small to play hockey. And I kind of figured out that their wallet was probably too small, And then also I had troubles with my mom growing up a little bit with yelling and screaming. I can't imagine what it would have been like with 4 a.m. ice times and the martyr syndrome that woman had, man. Like she would make me hear it every day. Do you realize what time I got up for you? Oh my God. Like it wouldn't have been good. So I played a lot of street hockey. The gun laws are really strict in Canada, so you're allowed to fight up there a little bit. Not really, but it's a lot more accepted. And a thing called consent is a defense up there where you can have. If I say, for instance, ask you to go outside, and we go outside and we throw fists, and everybody stays within the reasonable man clause, which is the terminology that they use, no crime has occurred other than maybe disturbing the peace or something like that, or disorderly, which aren't really laws that are seen in force up there unless you're doing a lot, So you could like just get in a bar fight, end up being friends with the person afterwards, or you see like the guy that fought your friend 3 weeks later in the bar. Hey man, fuck, you really got that dude good. Hey, there he is over there. Let's go have beers. We're all from the same town. I don't know why we're fighting each other anyways, because we're all from different suburbs of Vancouver. So it was kind of territorial at nightclubs and stuff like that in the early 20s, like who you were if you were in that certain town. Like a couple of bars had reputations for if you didn't go there. If you go there looking for fights, you're just going to get the shit kicked out of you because there'd be like 20 or 30 dudes from that town in that bar at all times kind of thing. So it was just weird, different.
Yeah. So you were born in Vancouver, and how old were you when you left Vancouver?
I was born in Tacoma, Washington.
Oh,
and then I was
actually American.
I'm actually American. I was raised in Canada. Parents brought me up there when I was 3. My dad worked for Pacific Tel and then got a job with BC Tel, which was the telephone company out there. Now it's called TELUS, and it's a conglomerate of British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are all one big group. So I moved back to the States in 2001.
So you were in your 30s, almost 40 when you came back to the States.
Yeah, 30 years old. I just turned 30. My kid was like 4. I just Vancouver was going too fast for me. A lot of my friends were involved with growing tomatoes in their basement and hanging around with dudes on bikes and stuff like that. And I didn't think that was going to go anywhere fast. I was one of the few ones that had like a young kid, and I just didn't want. Okay, I'm born in the States. I got a clean slate. I can just come down here and start all over again, which I kind of did, But I got stuck doing stuff down here too, though, which I think was part of the allure of wanting to interview me a little bit about just some of the things that happened, right?
Yeah. So you're American born, spent a good couple decades, it sounds like, in Canada. And
yeah,
then,
like 27 years, 26 years.
Yeah, so 2.5 decades. Or do you consider yourself more of a Canadian or more of an American?
I'd have to say more of an American because I've spent more of my adult life in the States. And the whole time that I was living in Canada, I always considered myself American. I learned a lot about like the different states and capitals and U.S. history and just basic stuff. The whole little bit of like a lot of young dudes have with a fascination of like war. And like I like really was into like World War II boats and making aircraft carrier models and stuff like that. And I always thought it was really fascinating. And airplanes, like World War II fighter planes and stuff like that. Had some of them hanging in my bedroom with like fishing wire, like in a fighting in like a cat in like a dog fight in the air and stuff like that. And so I always kind of really considered myself as American, but I take a lot of pride in growing up in Canada and being a part of Canada too. So I'm like just North American. I just tell people that, man, I grew up 10 minutes on both sides of the border. I don't really differentiate that much. There's a lot of good on both sides. and it was really just hard. I just grew up there kind of thing, because they're really similar, a lot more similar than different for sure.
Yeah. So Vancouver is what, a top 3 Canadian city in terms of population or just pure size or economy or however you want to think about it, right? It's a really big city.
It is. It's number 3 population wise, and I'm not sure about economy. GDP, it's probably bigger than Montreal, but less than Toronto, because Quebec has turned into like a welfare province over the last decade or so, where they don't have gross domestic product in the good, and Canada has distribution programs set up, so whatever you make as a province each year, you subsidize a province that lost money. So like the very back east of Canada is super welfare, because them in like the United States outfished the Atlantic cod, so they got rid of a whole species of fish that was their livelihood, right? So Newfoundland and New Brunswick and stuff, there's not a lot of economic growth there. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, a little tiny bit, and Ontario make all the money in Canada, a little bit of Manitoba, I guess, too. So
yeah,
I forgot what I was going to.
No, you're all good. So I guess, what was it like growing up in Vancouver? I've never been to Vancouver. I know they had the Olympics there. I don't even remember what year it was.
I think 2012, I think.
Yeah.
It was really cool. It was cool because I watched a city just like grow in size. Like you look at pictures from like the 70s where I lived in like the 60s, and it was just urban sprawl. Went from like 1 million people to like over 3 million people now, and the cities all grew and the suburbs all grew, and the city just slowly spread out. Like for instance, like I lived in Delta, and then there was Surrey, and then Langley to the east of that. And as you got more east on that side of the river, it became more rural, more farmland and stuff like that. But that urban sprawl has now gotten that big. I haven't been back up there in a long time, but I look at pictures of, or I see an address, and I can envision that intersection back then, and it's just, so Vancouver's just exploded. The cost of living there is absolutely crazy. Housing costs are absolutely insane. I'm super glad that I live in the southern United States for the ability to be able to afford a home, because nowhere on the West Coast at all can you like even the county that I lived in Washington State, it's $500,000 for a crappy house built in the 20s, that you're going to have like 100-year-old problems in plumbing and rot and everything. Like you're not getting in a good house for less than $600,000 or $700,000. And the economy, from what I know, like big companies that you could like make 6 figures guaranteed. There's a hospital, there is a refinery, and there's a university, and the university is 20% of the population of that town. And then so that whole county is like almost impossible to live in too. I'm sorry if I'm lacking the sense of humor that I did that day that you met me.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So the economy for Vancouver is based primarily on what?
A lot of tourism. There's a lot of, I would have to think there's a lot of like there's some corporate head offices there. I don't know what the number 1 export is in British Columbia anymore. It used to be like lumber and stuff like that. Tourism is huge. It has a really big central business district. So banking, I guess, would be phenomenal in that. I actually haven't looked at what the major things are, and it being in the States more, I could probably maybe tell you a little bit more about Seattle, just because how much that area has grown with technology versus Vancouver's money. A lot of it comes in from China. A lot of the money comes in North America in general, especially on the West Coast, is one of the reasons why reasons housing prices got up so much is because China uses North America like we use the Cayman Islands. They're allowed to shelter money over here. And then so British Columbia actually added a foreign home buyers tax. They added a empty home tax, because about 20 years ago, like 1 in 5 houses in Vancouver was sitting empty because all these 3-year-olds in China were getting them gifted. So it's cool that all the money that you're making out of that house, and I don't know if you're familiar with economics of leakages and injections, you're not getting any injections into that economy that you should out of that house, other than property tax. So there isn't 4 or 5 people in that house buying gas, buying groceries, paying gas bills, doing this, doing nothing. So you're losing that. And I think the only people that have any advantage of that would be like students, because now your class size is smaller. It should be 31, but there isn't enough kids to get above 25.
Yeah.
And then Seattle's just,
that's wild.
Yeah. And the technology sector in Washington State has just made that absolutely crazy. There's no state income tax in Washington State. So I never really thought of that as a bonus until people started to hate about California and their 13% weather tax that they have there, right? So even Louisiana has a 2% state income tax. And I don't know where the hell that goes because the state's like 40% poverty.
Yeah, we'll get to Louisiana in a bit. So, when you were at school in Canada, were you a good student, more of an athlete? Did you hang out with the good crowd, the wrong crowd? What was going through like in Canada?
So I was going to a Catholic school. I hung out with a lot of Filipino kids. So right away, all the cops up there thought that I was a gang member because I was a white dude hanging out with Asians. So I was in a gang. I was put in like gang file when I was like 15, 16 years old. By the time I was 21, living up there, I'd gotten in some trouble. I'm in recovery for alcoholism. I was an active addict alcoholic from like 17 until in my 30s with some time in between of some dryness, but not necessarily being clean as well. So I started getting in some trouble. I spent my 19th birthday in jail up in Canada, and whereas it was a super old jail, and you could go out. All of the general population would have to either go to yard or lock up at the same time. So 120 dudes would all be in one yard at one time. So when you're 19 years old and you're sitting there going, what the fuck did I do, man? Holy crap. And like, there's dudes with like, back then, like tattoos were rare, like dudes that had tattoos were like scary dudes, not some barista dude with mustache wax and like skinny jeans, and some of these dudes were just like ripped as shit too, like done a lot of time up there. And everyone in general population is from me, the guy that's in there for getting in a fight, to the guy that's on a murder beef. Everyone's in the same thing. You're not differentiated. Maybe you would be on your what unit you go back to that you stay on. They'll classify you a little tiny bit, but as far as yard goes, it's everybody in there, right? So then I moved to the States. I got in some trouble, there. I continued to drink and party and kind of couch surfed and really did nothing. Got in some more trouble, and then I moved to Utah, and I showed up in Salt Lake City when I was 20 years old. It's the only place that I had relatives. I got a welfare check from Canada, and they give you cash up there. So I got the $500 welfare check. Crossed the border with some friends. We got drunk the night before, filled like the bathtub full of like beer because it was so cheap, and we had someone that was 21 that could buy it because I wasn't even 21 yet. And I took the Greyhound all the way, a Dramamine fueled bus ride to Salt Lake City, where if you take too much Dramamine, which is an anti-motion sickness pill, you'll hallucinate and stuff like that. So I knew damn well that I was going to hallucinate. And I told myself that because fortunately or unfortunately, I'd done some hallucinogens in the past. And I knew that, you have to get the mindset of like, okay, you're going to be on drugs. Let's just wrap your head around this. It's never going to get too crazy because when it's all in all, you're just high. Right. So I showed up there. I ended up living there for a while, like really shitty job. I was working at like a Burger King and stuff like that. Couldn't find any good work, mostly because I was drinking and I couldn't afford to get ahead. I was living in a little bachelor's, like a studio apartment with this old lady that lived next door. And then I got drunk one night and decided that, I was still racking up long distance deals with different phone companies, talking to girls that I liked up in Canada. And I'm like, I got all drunk one night and I'm like, I'm going to drive back up to Canada. So then I ended up like growing up the way I did and maybe knew a little trick or two about how to start cars with a screwdriver. End up jump starting the car and it won't start, jump it again. And then boo, cops pulls up behind me. So I start running away. I ended up get caught. They're like, holy shit, the way that you ran, we're surprised you're white. So whatever that means, right? I'm like, well, I guess everybody fucking runs scared. That's literally what I said. I don't know what you're talking about. So yeah. So then I had to like get my auntie to bail me out, and how embarrassing is that? And I ended up apologizing to my aunt like 15, 20 years later. Well, with the inception of Facebook and stuff like that. So maybe it wasn't quite that long of just like how much of a piece of shit I was showing up at her door the way I did. And so then I moved back to Canada.
Chris, let's back up. So
all right.
You're hanging out with your Filipino buddies. You weren't actually in a gang.
It could be considered that. It was never like something where like it wasn't a criminal organization. It was more like as I got older, not with the Filipinos, but with the group, like I was alluding to, the people that were in the bar all the time, we were like a more of a clique. There was no organized crime to it. There was no anything that would, like, now with the catchphrase and the ideas behind Rico, there was nothing like organized, anything about that. Like everybody kind of did their own thing. Like maybe one dude or two guys were selling weed, other guys were doing this, other guys were doing that, but there was no like organized thing where there's money or any, like, I don't know why my mind jumped to sex trafficking, but that was predominant already here in Vancouver. There was, like, I knew a dude that ended up like being a pimp for a while, and I was just like, and then I just saw him on a local news thing, and he's like literally the definition of a career criminal, where now he's wanted for this and this and kidnapping, and he's already done like 10 years in prison and stuff like that over all this time. And so I did end up being like in this group where when it came down to me going to court for what I was telling you I got in trouble with, they said that in court that, you know, this person here, he's part of this Raiders gang and or Brookswood boys. And they go to parties and, you know, people get beat up and things go missing. They're really disrespectful to people. And then unfortunately, they classified me with a bunch of people that I'd never even met before that were like career criminals in Langley, that the judge and the DA were familiar with their names and stuff like that. Right. And I was like, the lawyer goes to me, he's like, yeah, you know, been in here for like 40 days. Just plead guilty, man. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I pled guilty to it. And he's like, the judge is like, I'm going to set an example for you and all your friends. I'm going to give you 4 months on top of that time. And I was like, so that's like my story of like that first time that I went to jail. I was like, holy shit, you know, and people in that group, I have 4 that have OD'd. 2 that are shot, that have been killed. One that just died last week. Of a couple other ones where it's just questionable. They either OD'd or they like had some sort of heart condition, directly or indirectly related to partying and stuff like that, right? So going back to me being clean and sober, that just really, really, really reinforces the decisions that I made and how important it is to reinstill all those things in with my son. It's 26 and still living in Vancouver and subject to how fast that city goes, because it's a huge city, and if you're only 20 minutes out of downtown, you're 20 minutes out of all the downtown problems, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So you went, all right, so go back to Auntie. You showed up at her door, and then what happened next?
Well, they let me live there for a while out in like their little camper trailer, and I wasn't really doing much. I got a job at like a CVS kind of idea. I don't know if that was the exact name, stocking shelves. And I couldn't really keep that job just because of my drinking. Like I could just go and there's so many gas stations. It was such a weird thing that you could buy, or you could, let's say, purvey alcohol everywhere in the States. Canada, you got to go to a beer store. You got to go to a liquor store. Here, it's in the grocery store, and some 80-year-old lady's working there. It's not that hard to throw a bottle down your pants or something, you know? So I continued to be an alcoholic, even though if I couldn't necessarily afford it, you know? And it took until, you know, way later on in my life that I realized that if I alleviate a couple of these variables, mostly just that one out of my life, then all my decision-making tree is, I'm not even on the same tree anymore, you know? It's just night and day difference, you know? So I showed up with my auntie. She ended up booting me out. So I ended up moving downtown, and I was staying in a hotel where you pay by the week, like literally like right downtown in the middle of winter. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Don't know anybody down there really. I have a cousin that's a alcoholic that would come and kick my door and like figuratively like every other weekend and be like, let's go. And he'd have like a 12-pack or 24-pack of Coors Light. Well, Utah Coors Light, it was like 3.2%. You could drink that shit all day and not get drunk. And he just like, we'd drive up to like Park City, which is up through like the Wasatch Canyon and stuff like that, and just go hang out. And then eventually I went back up with my parents in the December of 91. Because that's the year that, December of 91, because that's the year that the Huskies won the national championship. And I went back again. I lived in Utah again until like the spring, and then I met a dude and we moved back up to Canada because I just had enough of it, you know, or we were going to just stay up there for a little while and then go back. And then I ended up not going back. So that brings me to like about 93.
And so 93, you're still in your early mid-20s, right?
Yeah, I'm 22, 23.
And where were you?
Now I'm living in the suburbs of Vancouver again.
Wow. Okay.
But then, living there for a little tiny bit, getting a little more trouble. So I got some court dates that I have to deal with. And a buddy of mine, so the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, which is the monopoly that owns the company with all the insurance for cars. I think now maybe it's just basic and you can privatize all your accessories, but your basic insurance is going to have to go through them. Anyways, I gave my buddy like 25 grand because he got in a car accident. So he bought like a $2,000 boogie van, and me and him and 3 other friends all moved up to Alberta because the one buddy's like, "Oh, I can get us all jobs on the oil field. It's just going to be awesome." Yeah. Didn't think to realize that it's the end of January, like a week or two before Super Bowl, and we get out of the car in Dawson Creek, which is about an hour or so from where we're going to be living, and the sign says -55. I'm like, holy, what the like, it was so cold driving the van up there that we had like a blanket. It was like one of those vans with the mid-engine, so you could pull the cover off from inside of the box, inside of the cabin, and like work on it. And the air coming through that, leaking through, was stronger and colder than the heater, so we had like blankets there. We're like breath in the car and stuff like that. And I was like, and we just, again, man, we went up there with all this money and we partied our faces off, kind of got blacklisted in the town. I ended up having to, we kind of like, if you've ever seen the show Letterkenny, you ever watch that? No? Okay. So there's like there is a thing in Letterkenny where they talk about the toughest guy in town. So me being drunk and belligerent and not really giving a shit, I got in a couple bar fights up there. Next thing you know, we're outside and oh no, we're inside, pardon me. And it's like, again, it's super cold still. We're drinking cheap, shitty club brand draft with like Clamato juice, but it was only like $5 a pitcher, so we could just get smashed for cheap. And all of a sudden, the tough guy, he was like one league under an NHL, comes back into town, and he's all, "Heard you like to fight me, and you were fighting after the bar." And I'm already just like totally, what? I'm already like totally like just hammered, right? I'm like, holy shit, I'm gonna have to fight this dude, man. So we go outside. It's literally -20 Celsius. Not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. I haven't learned that conversion that far down in negatives. I'm really good in the positives. You guys like, all right. So I just ripped my shirt off, right? I'm like, because I don't want the guy to be able to grab a hold of me or anything like that. Plus, I kind of want to look as crazy as I can. And he's like, "Come on, let's go then." I'm like, "Listen, dude, I'm not supposed to win this fight, but I guarantee you'll feel me tomorrow, man. I'm going to get a couple nice ones in, man. I'm not afraid to fucking lose this fight. Let's go." And he's just kind of humming around. There's like probably 60, 70 people outside the bar watching this in a circle. And he finally like, "All right, Vancouver, you're fucking crazy. Let's go. Let's just go have another drink. I got some drinks in my car." And then we went over to his car and started drinking in his Camaro or IROC Z28, which totally suited like the mullet wearing dude. Because Alberta was still like, this is 92. Alberta's still stuck in the rocker era. Like everyone else has kind of gone beyond that, but they're still in like the skin tight Wranglers and like long hair center parted and stuff, right? So then I moved from Alberta. Wow, this is crazy.
Hold on, Chris. If you never touched alcohol in your life or any sort of thing that would get you high, do you think you would have ever been in trouble with the law, kind of thing?
Probably not. No, not at all. Because it was all directly related to the decisions that I made when I was drunk or using, right? Yeah. And just being in, just putting yourself in the situation. It's like probability, like the probability of me getting hit by a car when I'm standing on my lawn versus the street are two different things. And it has nothing to do with luck even. It's just variance, and the chance of that happening, and chance will eventually, you're playing roulette. You got 1 out of 37 chance. That's going to roll one time, and it was just a lot of being out later than I should be and doing dumb stuff,
Some of that's youth.
Yes. And there's some regret, but there isn't, man. I wouldn't be the person who I am. And I had a lot of good times, and I earned my stripes. I've never laughed so hard in my life as I did some of the times that I was hanging out with those friends. And I love those friends a piece of still. And it's good to see that some of them have really gotten their shit together. You know what I mean? And thank God for something like Facebook that I can actually like touch base with some of these people and stay in touch with these people. And like, I'm going up to Vancouver in December, and I just reached out to a dude. He just joined Facebook. His wife's been on Facebook the whole time. Haven't seen him in over 20 years. And I'm like, dude, I'm coming up in December. Let's hook up. And I had no way to even get a hold of him. So he's like, oh, hell yeah, for sure. So I'm going to try and work something out with some of that. Just he's worked for Parks Board in Vancouver for like, he's 4 years away from retirement. So he's laughing. He's been hiding the shovel for like the last 20 years. You know what I mean? Like getting all the work done by noon, and then you can just sit around. He's like, literally, that's how we do it. We just go as fast as we can in the morning, and then I can just fuck the dog, which is Canadian for do nothing all afternoon.
I'm learning all kinds of things today, Chris. All right, so you're leaving Alberta. You're in your mid-20s at this point, it sounds like.
Yes. So then I moved from Grand Prairie to Edmonton because I pretty much got blacklisted in Alberta. I mean, up in Grand Prairie for jobs because we were those Vancouver guys and we were all up to bad news. And it's really easy when as soon as you look at my resume and it says Vancouver, like there wasn't a ton of like resume people with resumes from Vancouver at that time. Like, you know what I mean? I was kind of like stand out. Like, so I moved to Edmonton and we all rented a place. Though there was 3 of us left by then. Yeah, 2 people had already gone home. 3 of us left by then, and we rented an apartment. I got a job at like a steak and fish house in like South Edmonton. I have to take the LRT every day, and I never got ahead again just because I was buying a 6-pack after work every day. I didn't have the discretionary income to be able to drink as much as I was drinking and make budgets meet, but that idea and concept it was just a part of my life. Well, what do you mean I'm not drinking? It was just, I'm drinking, like it was just crazy. So lived up there for a while. As soon as the winter hit again and it started getting cold, I'm like, I got a paycheck and I got on an airplane and I flew back to Vancouver. So that was in like 1993. Yes. So now that's like the fall of 1993. So I came back and I still had some stuff that I had to deal with. And I ended up getting incarcerated again for a couple more months. During that time, I decided like I'm fucking done. Oh, sorry, man. I'm done. I gotta change my ways. And I didn't, but I still didn't realize that alcohol was the root of all this thing. I just have to stop hanging out with these people. I got to get a job. I got to go to school. what am I doing? I did pretty well in high school. I haven't gone back to college. Now it's been like a 4-year gap year and I got a criminal record. Like, what the hell was I doing? You know what I mean? Like, and, so I got out. My dad actually picked me up from the jail and drove me to the school, and we signed up for school. I cut off my hair. I had my hair like undercut where you got the side and the back shaved, but the up top is in a big ponytail. So never man bun kind of thing. You just kind of held it down until it was long enough that you could actually have like a decent sized ponytail. You know what I'm saying? And then cut that all off, and I started going to school, and I got a job and started working at a bar because I just kept pestering them because I really wanted to work at this place. And I still drinking again. And then going to school, ended up becoming a bartender after working there for a couple of years when Mike Tyson got out of prison, and started doing pay-per-views. And they asked me to be a bar back. And like any bar industry, promotion through attrition happens quite fast sometimes, where I went from being a bar back to like working Friday nights in like 6 months because the 2 other bartenders in front of me both screwed up. Got thrown in jail or stole or something. I don't even really remember the incidents. Just kept calling in sick all the time, just because you get caught up in that. Which I'm glad you caught me at a time in my life where I'm not caught up in like drinking every day after work or anything like that, because like, that's getting along that day. That's the path that it was, like, all right, I work a day shift. I'm just going to go out after work. I'd be like a DUI case every day living down here. It's just ridiculous. And there's so many of them. Like driving home at like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning on the freeway here is ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. They could like build schools with just pulling people over for DUIs here. You know what I mean? And it's weird that in New Orleans, yeah, like up in Canada, they have roadblocks and shit. They'll stop the 2 exits of you getting out of a nightclub. You're going through a roadblock, you leaving that bar, and they don't do that at all down here. They just renting it. It's more about revenue generation than it is anything else. And it is that way, like in Washington State, even, man, the highway patrol dudes just sit outside the nightclubs and just pick people up. Yeah,
it's the one. Well, in theory, they're hopefully doing it to make that environment safer. But yeah, it's definitely a revenue generator too. All right, so you're in Edmonton. You're tending bar, but are you staying out of trouble?
Mostly. I know I'm back in Vancouver again, and I'm tending bar. So I moved back. Yes and no. I'm still like going out a lot. I ended up having my son like right in 97. So, but then by like 1999, I started getting involved in other chemicals and it led to a breakup between me and my kid's mom. So I quit drinking because of that whole reason, but I quit drinking, but I continued to party. So I replaced alcohol with cocaine, which is really not a good, I do not recommend. 1 out of 10. It sucks. And I'd have like people like, hey man, fuck, you're doing good, man. You haven't drank in like a year. I'm like, yeah, I know. Great. Aren't I doing good? Aren't I doing good? And then, so it just got worse and worse and worse. And then there's a whole other part of this that I haven't really talked about, in the sense that, being born in the States, I did a couple crimes that could make me criminally admissible to staying in Canada, right? So when I was in Alberta, they came and picked me up. They brought me to immigration. They're like, okay, we're going to deport you, but you can stay here while you appeal it. I'm like, okay. So I pretended like nothing happened. I stayed in Alberta. I moved back to Vancouver. I'm living in British Columbia, and this is from like 94 to, I got that job at that bar in 96. And I went into Vancouver once and checked with immigration, and they're like, oh, we don't see that you're on file anywhere. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to say a word. So I actually worked under a false social insurance number in Canada. I just changed one number, and my sister's an accountant, and I just told the bookkeeper manager lady, I'm like, look, just don't take any federal taxes off my check. My sister's doing all my taxes for me. I'm investing it. I got something really shrewd going on here, blah, 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 blah. So then in that quitting drinking thing, again, I'm falling back into my story where you start involving yourselves in places and people and situations that you shouldn't. And so I had quit drinking. Now I'm falling behind and stuff because I'm doing so much drugs that I couldn't keep up with a payment that I got like a home entertainment. I bought a DVD player and a surround sound from this place when me and the kid's mom broke up, to make myself feel better, but I couldn't keep up on the payments. So they ended up finding out, the police somehow, or the immigration people somehow found out that I was working there, and they came and picked me up on a Thursday of a long weekend. So what that entailed is I get picked up on the Thursday. They're like, hey, are you Chris Karpes? I'm like, yeah. They're like, we're immigration. They like try and grab me and pull me over the bar. I'm like, I kind of try to run out the back door. I'm like, I realize it's useless. The place is like kind of surrounded and stuff like that. And they put me in there for like 5 days, and then they bring me downtown Vancouver. They're like, okay, well, we're kicking you out. Do you have any relatives anywhere in the States? I'm like, nope. They literally drive me to the border and drop me off. So I got like $400 cash on me. They drop me off at the border. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. So now I'm in the States. This is like pre like any sort of real cell phone days kind of thing. So I'm like making collect calls. I call my kid's mom. I'm like, hey, it's crazy. What happened? Blah, blah, blah. Explaining to her, okay, as soon as it gets dark, I'm going to jump the ditch, which is all that separates Canada and the United States on the West Coast right there at the Peace Arch crossing is literally a ditch. As soon as you're in Canada, you're on Zero Avenue, and you're in like a really affluent area of Vancouver where a white dude jogging in shorts at 7:00 at night really isn't weird, right? So every time a car come by, I kind of hide in the ditch, and she picked me up. Now I'm homeless. I got my truck. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm still partying. A buddy of mine's staying at his house, and he's like, finally, he just looks at me. He's like, man, you got to go, dude. You got to go. You're kicked out of the country. You're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? So I had already bought like a $200 camper to plan to leave with. And I had my truck that I was behind on payments with. And I literally drove to the border with no insurance, no tabs or nothing. And I got to the American people, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just going down in the States. And they're like, well, you don't have any tabs. And I broke down crying. They're like, come in. I told them what happened. I'm like, this is like literally everything I know. Oh, and I don't have anything. I'm not allowed to go back there. If you turn me around, I'm going to get arrested. They don't even know that I'm back up there right now, grabbing all this shit to come down here. I'm like, I don't really know what you can do. I guess you can tear my car apart and leave me here. And then I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And they rip the whole truck apart. They rip the camper apart. And then they're like, look, man, just get on that road over there. Don't let any state troopers go park there's a state park right over there. Go kart there and get your shit figured out. So then now I'm in the States, and then it's like in a little beach town that's right across the border, so I was familiar with it. Staying in the state park, and found a job, and then now it's like 2001, and I'm living in the States. So still actively drinking again because I moved to the States. I quit. I got away from the chemicals because of lack of availability. So I started I started drinking again because it's so easy to drink and so cheap to drink in the States that became my crutch for a little while. I don't know where you want me to keep going with.
No. So you're in, it sounds like you're in Washington State at this point.
Yeah. Just across the border, like Whatcom County.
Yeah, and you're working. You're only 30.
Yes.
And you have a son at this point.
Yeah, he's 3.
He was 3 at that point, and you were not a big part of his life. It sounds like, at least.
No. I was the first 2 years I lived with him. The first 2.5 years. The following year after that, I had him once or twice a week. Me and his mom weren't together, but I'd still come over to the house on Friday nights or on Sunday nights afterwards. But I was also partying a lot, so I'd only stay for a little while. Our relationship was super shaky, so I was more or less just, okay, we're not getting along. So I go, I put him to sleep and put him to bed. I tried to stay as much of a part of his life as I could.
Did she live in Washington too?
No, she just lives outside of Vancouver. She lived like 20 minutes from the border.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so you were a big part of his life.
Yeah. Except for there was a time when, again, dealing with my addictions and stuff like that I ended up, now I found a substitute crutch in another stimulant in the form of meth, where I was just doing that, and that just slowly eroded at my livelihood, and I got bad enough that I got in some trouble, and it's just such a sad story, man. I ended up owing like 30 days in jail. I never reported. I'm living in this little town right on the border, and I'm walking back to the apartment that I'm living with the girl with my kid, and one of the cops in the town notices me, and he swings around. He's like, "Hey, you got a warrant. You're coming with us." I'm like, "You're really going to arrest me in front of my kid?" They're like, "Yep." So they arrested me in front of my kid. All I can think of is my kid looking at me through the window, crying and stuff like that, and me just being, wow, I still didn't learn. All I worried about is like getting out on bail and and I still just so involved in all of that. And my kid's mom is like, "Look, man, you're not well, dude. I'm not going to let you see him until you get your shit together." Right. So, we'd still talk once in a while, but I would go like a month or two. I was spun out. Like, there's no better way to describe it. I was just being really crazy, and it ended up putting me in jail again because I got charged for having Percocets, and they're each pill is a felony. So because I had 8 Percocets that weren't my script, I got charged for 8 felonies. So you really got to plead guilty to some of them with criminal record and stuff. Then now I'm getting locked up I don't think I've even told you this part. I just told you that I had stories, man. So now I'm getting locked up. I did 4 months in county, and they gave me 20 months for 2 felonies. And Washington State runs on a point system with felonies. So when you start off at 0, there's no mandatory minimum. After 1, once you get to 2 points, there's a mandatory minimum of 12 months. So your second point, you're doing a year and a day in jail. And every felony after that, you get at least 1 point, right? So when I got to that point, now I'm in jail. I'm like, man, if I even get another point, I'm starting at 20 months. Like, I can't even be around these people ever again. I can't, I'm envisioning like them finding an empty bag in my back car, or just being involved in any of that, right? And then I'm like, my kid won't even talk to me on the phone, man. And that was my epiphany. That was my ultimate bottom. And that I tell people, like, in early recovery, they want to know about friends that want to recover. I'm like, they got to find out what their bottom is. And I've said that to people I've had a couple of people reach out to me. I don't know how well they're doing anymore. I just gave them what I can, and that's all I can do, right? Marcus Aurelius is really good at it. He said, you explain something to someone once, after that, you're wasting both of yours and theirs time. That's all you can do. So, do you want this to be your bottom? In things at AA meetings, they always have that word "yet" on the wall. Like, that might not have happened to you yet. Like, do you want this to be your bottom? Because it can and will get shittier. A lot of people with enablers or financial backing, they don't get a chance to really hit the bottom until they die. So, and now it comes to the point where I'm glad that I've been through some, like, perspective wise, when some bad things happen to me, I'm like, yeah, did you have a good Christmas? I'm like, back of my head, I'm like, well, I spent the Christmas in jail. So really, this one's not that bad. Not that bad at all. Right. So, and then now since then, I got all that done, and that was in like 2008. I've been clean and sober since then. There may be, I'll confess, I may be smoking a little bit of marijuana now and again, but I've never written my life off over a joint, and then I've been in New Orleans for 8 years.
Alcohol is a drug, and it obviously people can get very addicted to it. You're living testimony of that. Cocaine, I don't have any personal experience with it. I know people when they were in their 20s that did it. It became addictive, but they seem to be able to get away from it pretty easily. But meth is and you tell me, I've been told that meth is a super addictive drug.
It's super addictive because it creeps up on you. It's not like if you like snort a pill or do an opioid where you like almost instantaneously feel that little whoosh, or if you do like a bump, you get that big fat high, and however you do it, the higher that high is and the faster the crash is, whether or not you're snorting it, smoking it, or slamming it, it will go up, you know? Meth is like one of those things that it's a lot like cocaine, where the habit will really creep up on you. Like I use an analogy. It's like starting to smoke cigarettes. You're like, hey man, can I have a drag of that cigarette? And you're like, man, how could someone ever smoke 2 packs a day? You know? And then you're like, hey man, can I borrow smoke? And then you're like, hey, you want to go halfers on a pack? Still in your head, like, can't believe some of these guys get up to 3 packs a day. And it's the same with like, well, meth, especially because coke, you get that huge high and then you want more. Meth is like, oh, I did a little bit and like, holy shit, I got all that energy. It feels really good. But then you need more. Then you start, again, that whole who you're associating with is just huge. What peer group that you're in is going to dictate so much of the decisions and how you rationalize and normalize and all of that, you know, like how you think that, oh yeah, this is tolerable. It's not tolerable. Like I've sat there before, like when I was doing cocaine, like 2 days later, sitting in a room with dudes that are like having conversation with them. And like, these are some of the stupidest people I've ever seen. And it was the same with like, no offense to like, I'll never use a thing, especially in jail, of like, I'm not like you guys, but there was a large proportion of that jail population there. I was like, man, you guys have had some really rough lives. And I should have been able, in both intelligence and resources, not to make the same mistakes as you, you know? And so, and a lot of like, dude, in Washington State, a lot of those, like I'd say 80% of that prison population is there because of substance abuse problems. Like people that are in there for drugs and like vehicle manslaughter because they were drunk, or not growing weed, but like meth labs. And those guys are getting like broken off like 5-7 years and stuff. And then the whole point system thing, like dudes that are just repetitively getting caught with like small amounts, and then now they're on their 4th point, and the mandatory minimum's 36 months. You got to do 3 years now because it's the 3rd or the 4th time that you've been caught with a drug. So then you look at like Oregon and then Vancouver doing that pilot project with not charging you for simple possession if you choose to go into like a rehab or something like that. I'm not saying that that's the best solution at all, but it also stops the revolving door of recidivism of like that kid that just can't get off the dope. He grew up in a total shitty family. He's got nothing. The United States especially doesn't prepare you at all for your release from incarceration, at least not in the county jail level. And once you got to the prison and you're in there on a drug offense, they make you take treatment. Like I did an what is it called? Intensive outpatient is what it's called, because you're not like inpatient where you're locked up, but an intensive outpatient where you're there structured for 3 days a week for multiple hours and teaches you some skills, you know? And the meth is just, it just creeps up on people and people don't know. And then they end up like becoming a dealer and getting caught with quantities because they're just supporting a habit and they just don't know. And then people that get into slamming that stuff is just crazy because you don't know what's in it, you know, and you're not using any filter at all. It's going straight intravenous, you know, and then those are the people that tend to be like the pickers and because all the toxins are just coming out in their skin because your liver or nothing, or your skin hasn't had a chance to absorb any of it. You know, I think that's just a theory, of course, but like the people that did the needles were always the worst in any heavy drug use. And fortunately, going to jail at a young age kept me away from doing opioids because I saw people coming off heroin when I was like, again, 19, 20 in Vancouver, being like, I'm never getting addicted to a drug that makes you that sick if you want to quit. That's what makes the opioid so hard, is like, they will kick the shit out of you for 3 days. I knew 2 people in Vancouver that had habits at $30, $40 a day just to stay well. I knew a guy in Washington State when I was getting all involved in that stuff and going back to the Vicodin thing, where that was the reason why I had him at my house, was because I just keep pills for a couple of dudes that I know that had really bad opioid problems. And if they needed something, then I'd be like, come over here, man, I got a couple of things for you. And then they trade me something else or something, you know?
So
yeah, you're right about meth being the worst.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had heard it. You've lived it. So your son stops talking to you. That becomes your epiphany and your rock bottom. How old was he when that started? Roughly.
He was 10.
He was 10.
He was 10 going on to 11. And I hadn't seen him in almost 6-8 months, and been in prison now for another 6 or 8 months. So I haven't even talked to him on the phone in almost a year. And he just didn't even want to talk to me. And that just broke my heart. I'm in tears in front of hardcore prison inmates, this is a camp. So the camp is minimum security. So there's two ends of the population that's in a camp, and that's the people that really didn't do a lot. Watch this see it again. They have a scoring system. The younger you are and the more violent the crime it is, the higher likelihood you're going to max out as far as level of incarceration being minimum, medium, max, super max kind of thing, right? And so the camp is a minimum security. So that's those people, and it's the people coming off doing 5-7 year bits that have made their way to minimum security. So none of these guys want anything to do with any of that petty small shit. So that part of it was so uncontrollable to me that wow, now all these people, not that anyone ever cared, and I know damn well that the spotlight effect was in effect there, but it's still wow, I'm uncontrollably crying in front of grown men, all because of what? Because of drugs and alcohol, man. I need to just get the F away from it. Cause like I said, almost everybody in there was for that, man. They're breaking or their fourth protection order violation. I can't believe it, man. I'm just trying to call her. Well, you broke your no contact order 4 times, dude. And that the 4th time's a year and a day. So you really, so it's just that level of why am I involving myself with this peer group when I know I'm not arrogant at all, but I know that I'm more intelligent if my mind's clear to do any of this shit. And it's just so enveloped, and it just clouds your judgment so much. You're not thinking rationally. You're not really who you are.
So you're in your late 30s. You've decided you want to get sober. Walk me through how you did that.
Well, the 13 months that I was incarcerated for, the 395 days that I did in a row, was a really good foundation. When I got arrested on that day, me and the girl that I was staying with and hanging out with, she just got caught shoplifting, and I was in the vehicle. So, and there was a little tiny, sigh of relief. It's finally over, man. Because we were living in a hotel. All my stuff was packed away. I had it safe at what I thought was safe at people's houses until I could figure all this shit out, which was going nowhere. I was kind of relieved. And then I thought that I'd be able to go through drug court and deal with it then, but then I couldn't. And I ended up getting this surmountable sentence that they started making me do the intensive outpatient. And then once I got released with early release, so you do 2/3 of your time, you gotta go, and then I'm on paper for another year, meaning parole or community corrections, under supervision of community corrections, which is a state version of probation that you get if you got a charge out of the county courthouse kind of thing. So these guys are a lot stricter. The minute you get picked up on one, you're going to go do 30 days. They're just going to pick you up and you're doing 30 days for the violation. And I had a pretty decent, without a better way to put it, I kind of bonded well with the guy that was my CCO, the community corrections officer. And I was committed to I was living at a clean and sober house, trying to get a job. I got a job right away. I'm the number one thing is I just got to get working. I got to just keep my nose to the grind, doing 3 meetings a week as prescribed by that, continuing aftercare at the corrections office. They did aftercare for people coming out of prison to make sure that you try and I was subjected to UAs, and I'm not doing any of this anymore. I can't. So I got the job. I got a job working at a place, and I was still looking for better work. And I ended up getting a job at a casino, even with the criminal history that I had, because I knew the HR lady. I knew a bunch of people that worked there because the bar that I worked at was right next to the reservation in the town next to it. And I'd met all these people before. And this Mary lady, I'm just give me another chance, man. You met me when I was doing okay, and then you saw me get really bad at that bar. You know that I'm a good person. I was really good friends with their daughter, so they gave me like a second chance. And I'm a success story. I ended up getting a letter of recommendation from the corrections officer, like the parole officer. He's like, this guy's been one of the best clients that I've ever had, because I asked him to write me one to get the job at the casino, right? He's like, this guy's been one of the best things. He's always been on time, paying the internet, doing everything right. I'm like, that's crazy that I'm using a letter of reference from a parole officer to get a job, right? But sure enough, there we are. And then I worked there for 5 years, and then now I've been living down here in blah, 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 for the last 8 years.
Yeah, so I won't ask you why you moved to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it's a big cultural change. It has to be.
It is.
Part of Canada, northwest part of the U.S., moving to that part of the country's. I can't think of a bigger culture shock.
It is and it isn't, man. It's like I'm not going out immersing myself in it so much. I grew up in Vancouver. I lived in Edmonton. I lived in Salt Lake. Lived in Salt Lake as like a 19-year-old street kid, pretty much. Hyper aware of like big cities and stuff. So the New Orleans itself wasn't culturally that big of a shock to me. It's actually really cool. The geography is a bit of a shock to me, like how flat it is, and the weather is a bit of a shock to me, but to a pleasant surprise in the sense that I'd way rather be hot for 4 months out of the year than deal with rain and stuff for a bunch of time, you know?
So, Chris, you're when I met you a few weeks ago, you're like, yeah, I'm basically a recovering alcoholic. I've been clean for a long time, or been sober for a long time. But you work in a bar. Is that hard?
I think it would have been if I didn't have that time away to get some clean time and realize the bottom that I hit and how everything correlates to that. And like people in the program would be like, so worst thing you do, you're playing with fire, da 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 da. But early on in my sobriety, as a bartender, I'd kind of pick a couple people out. You know, the two people that I pick out each day was like, see the really drunk guy? I was like, how many times was I that guy? And then the other guy would be like, would I want to fight this guy if I was drunk? And then sometimes that was the same guy. So I get the twofer just for that. Oh my God, dude, you got to go. Because I'm getting mad at you right now and I'm totally sober. Yeah. So that's what I use as like a benchmark. Like, do I ever want to be that? And then just seeing just being around like a lot of the early part of it and knowing that how addiction works and stuff like that, watching people even just gamble at the casino that I was working at, you know, like servers bitching about how they had to do this and that and work so hard to do this. And then as soon as you get off work, it takes a while longer to close as a bartender. You look and they're putting all their tip money back in the slot machine. It's like having a couple drinks, like go home, you know? Yeah. So then like, that's one addiction that I know that I've never even gone near, you know, there's gambling. And I don't like the way they normalize gambling in every sports show now. I had a little finger waggle to a couple kids that were with their parents that are like 22-year-olds that were in the bar a couple days ago and they're betting on stuff. I'm like, be careful with that, man. Like it's super addicting and you won't notice until I'm like, you only bet what you can afford. Actually, just don't at all. How about that? Because you're going to end up losing in the long run anyways, you know?
Yep, that's right.
So
that's absolutely right. So besides bartending and how do you spend your time? Play a lot of golf? What else is going on?
Play golf about once a week and I go to the gym about 3 times a week. I'm about to go there now. And other than that, unfortunately, I spend way too much time on like Facebook and stuck in my phone. But it's really having an uneventful life at this age isn't really that bad. You know, I ran around crazy for the fear of missing out for all of my 20s kind of thing, right? So it's really not that big a deal to me. It's cheaper to stay home. I'm cheap as hell. It costs money if I go and do stuff, right? So
yeah,
spend money on.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just spend money on golf. Actually, just donated some clubs today, so that felt good.
It's an expensive way to spend your time, but once a week you can probably get away with it.
Yeah, it's not too bad. A couple $100 a month, man.
Yeah. Hey, so your son, where is he these days?
He's up in Vancouver. He lives in the outskirts, and he owns his own company. He's an electrician up there.
Nice.
Doing super good, man. He's got 3 people working for him already, and I've been always totally open with him about my addiction and the problems that he has, and he talks to me a little bit about it, and he's fully aware of the predisposition of it on both my and his mom's side of it. Like I had no idea being adopted that I was that predisposed to it. You know, I don't know if that would have affected or changed anything in my thinking, you know, but my parents had no clue of like they're both like teetotaling. Like they had no idea of like it at all. Like, oh, you're drinking too much, and no concept of like why I am. But like the education and understanding of stuff like that in the 80s is way different than now. Like everybody's like, oh, society's getting softer. No, society's getting more evolved in the sense that that might have been acceptable 30 years ago, but it's not now. This behavior might have been unknown, but there's reasons why that happens. And you know what? We have that available to you now. It's like the idea of like looking up a baby book in the 80s versus online now of like how to deal with colic, how to deal with thrush. Like if you didn't know, you didn't know. You went to the doctor and like, oh my God, your kid's actually colicky and had thrush. That's why he's crying all the time, which is like what happened with my kid. You know what I mean? Like, me and his mom were like, I don't know, we knew that we knew he was thrushy because he had like a yellow tongue, but we had no idea, And then nowadays it's so society, I think, should be better, but then I don't know, it's not because there's so much misinformation right now, and everybody just wants their own little confirmation bias and to believe what they want to believe is true, that it's dividing everything even more. But I don't think we're here to talk philosophy.
We can if you want, but greed's a big part of it too. And so whether it's the opioid crisis or name something where people get hurt, there are people making a lot of money off that. But yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole pretty quickly there. But it sounds like your relationship with your son is pretty good these days. Yeah.
I talk to him like every day via Facebook Messenger because you can text message for free via that. So I talk to him every day.
Yeah, that's cool.
I talk to them on phone. It's a little harder to talk to the younger kids on the phone. They don't really like talking that much on it. I'm really not huge on it either. Well, I don't care either way, As long as I stay in touch with them verbally. I call him every couple of weeks. We talk for a few minutes, and you can tell that he kind of wants to get off the phone almost right away anyways, but he's a 26-year-old kid. I'm just happy I have contact with him. Like I go back to like how much I talked to my dad when I was 26, and that relationship really wasn't there. But I feel like our generation of parenting is a lot more involved as a father than my dad was. A part of my life, but he wasn't an active part, like so much like he didn't go out and play with me and be that, like he drove me to sports and he did stuff, but there wasn't a lot of like that familial commitment to it. Like the roles have changed, the gender disparity, or not so much, but the role that you play in a family is different. Like I feel like males are way more involved in their kids' lives now, or in like at least in the people that I've been around, Yeah. And a lot more kids or parents are proud of their kids, it seems, right?
Hey, I work with. Chris, you mentioned that you're adopted. How old were you when you found out?
I've always known.
So you knew from like the age of like 4.
Yeah. I've always just kind of known that I'm adopted, man. It never really, I don't know if it didn't ever really bother me consciously that I know of, but in talking to a counselor and like, again, obviously I've had some behavioral problems that may have been substance abuse related or not. What did those stem from? And then me going back to having a BS in psychology myself and overanalyzing and being way too introspective at times, maybe like understanding where these things stem from, and having a couple of theories about that. Definitely attachment theory. I don't know if you're familiar with Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby attachment theory. If you ever look that up, it all has to do with the study that they did is long story short, they have 3 different types of attachment: secure, ambivalent, and avoidant. And the way that they test it for is they bring people into a mother and son into a room with like 2 observers, and then they'd be like, all right, well, hey, we're going to go talk to your mom outside for a little while. You guys play over here with toys and stuff. And so then what they do is they have the parents come back in, and the kids that were attached securely, they come up, grab the mom's leg. Hey, mom, all right, checking in, go off. The kid that was ambivalently attached, like sometimes you got love, sometimes you didn't know, they would come up and they would be the worst. They'd be like, oh my God, I don't know how to react. I'm going to cry because I was scared. Holy shit, what do I do? And then the other one would be avoidant, where like their parents really aren't a part of their lives. They look up at them and fuck, you don't care anyways. So they go on and keep playing with the kid. And they study that, and that stemmed from them looking at back up post-World War II, all the orphanages that they had. They were in like Hungary and stuff like that. They're putting kids in like big, huge tubs and washing them with hoses and never touching them because they thought that any sort of attachment to these kids at all is going to be terrible. And you as nurses, you can't do that. We have to keep them separate until they get adopted. And then they started looking at that as being wrong, and then they had that other study where they have like a monkey with like a fake mom, And if they have fur on it, that will attach to it. But if it's just the wire structure of it, it doesn't, and stuff like that. So again, sorry, just delving into the mice. So that, I believe, having a weird attachment with my mom and being ambivalent, and now being in a really strong marriage for 9 years and identifying some of the things where I may fail, a lot of that has to do with just, I think that, I don't know, I could never study it, but it's weird.
Yeah, there's a fine line between critical thinking and overthinking.
Yes, for sure, right?
Yeah,
Without a doubt. That's so true. That's so true.
So whatever you're comfortable with, tell me about your wife of 9 years.
She was born and raised in Washington State. I met her. We both have come out of like fairly toxic relationships. She got a job at my job up in Washington because she wanted a job. That was fun. We hit it off really well and just ended up being together. And then I came down here with her for her job. Yeah. So she's awesome. She was partying a little bit when we first met. She was drinking, and I had a couple coworkers be like, "Well, you're married an alcoholic. You're not drinking." I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna be hanging around with addicts and alcoholics, whether they're sober or not, just because that's how my personality is," which is what I learned at a meeting, and it really stuck. Or maybe it was treatment. I don't even know if it's true. So I'm like, and I really loved her, and I'm like, I can deal with her drinking a little bit. She wasn't like a terrible drunk. She was one of those people that was just a maintenance drinker, just have a couple drinks every day, and then she decided to stop drinking like 3 years ago, and I kind of, like, a part of my brain is like, she'll see that I'm not drinking and we're going out and doing all these things. She'll probably catch on that you don't really need to, it's kind of overrated, and I think she started drinking later on in her life. She didn't have like an early drinking career like I did. And she's awesome. She's 100% supportive. I've never been in a better relationship.
So I know recovering alcoholics don't like talking about AA a lot, but are you still active in that?
No.
Was that ever a thing for you?
It was for a while. And it's kind of prissy. It's kind of culty, and it relies too much on the premise of God being your higher power and all that. And people, like, if you're not Christian, then people look a little bit toward you. For me, the idea of God that I learned was good, orderly direction. And my higher power literally was the group, because I couldn't do it without them, and hearing their stories and how effed up their lives were when they were young, and some of the things that they went through that I hadn't been through again yet, and I could very well get there. And I kind of felt like, although NA, there was a lot of people faking and a lot of people still using in NA, and AA was a little more making sure that, you can come there drunk, but you don't want you to come there drunk. Where like people were still high at some of the NA meetings and stuff. NA was a lot less snobby, and I felt a lot more welcomed at NA, and people were a lot more understanding without that aloofness of like, well, here at AA, we're just drunks. You're a drug addict. And there's almost that differentiation sometimes, or that's what I felt. And no, for sure. It was real, man. Like, I'm not saying how I felt. I don't know why I have to give a disclaimer about that feeling, because it was totally true. And so yeah, I kind of went away from meetings a little while. I ended up, when my wife was she had to go away. When she went and did some treatment, I went and did a couple meetings just to show her solidarity, and I went and met her up there. And it is good to put your back in it's good to go to one every once in a while. I haven't, and they say that it's good for your sobriety, but I'm like, you can't ever say that I've grappled it, because I know that monkey's just doing push-ups waiting for me to mess up. But I have every day I'm around people that still are engaged in that activity, and it just reminds me of like, it's useless and it go nowhere, and it's just so much discomfort for that little bit of better feeling. And if you would just address what the underlying things are that are making you hide, which is what's most substance abuse, like all of substance abuse is really, then you can get it through life on life's terms, which is one of those catchphrases in the program kind of thing, right? I don't mind AA at all, and it does people a lot of good, and it's really cool that you can do online meetings. It's really cool that they'll have like 24-hour AA meetings on like all the major holidays, that you can go to a hall and be around people like 24 hours a day. And it does some people really, really, really good. Other people, that turns into their crutch, and then they're doing like 3 meetings a day, and they're just being over the top about everything about it, and I couldn't have done it without God. No God's the same. I'm not going to get into religion. It's like, well, no, you can't say one without the other, because he's also the same guy that let you do that, or whatever. Anyways, I'm not going to even go down that road. So I have nothing wrong with AA. Maybe the concept of it is a little dated and there are other treatment programs, but I don't think there's anyone that's been proven to be as successful of that. But again, you have to go cross methodology and different things to, I think, heal properly. Like it isn't like you fit into the mold of like, let's do our 12 steps and boom, look at you, you're all better, because a lot of people, it's a lot harder to let go of resentments. A lot of people, I carried guilt around forever. That was the biggest thing, is figuring out that I don't have to feel guilty about all this stuff, all these mistakes that I made that I explained to you early in the thing while I had a kid and I was really young and he was really young and I was still doing all this stupid shit. I didn't have to carry that around with me anymore. And once I let that go, that was such a huge thing, of being able to understand that I got to get past that and live in the now,
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really simple to say and sounds kind of trite, but yeah, learn from the past but live in the moment, right?
Yes.
It's really easy to say. You've lived it. It's really hard to get past your past, but once you do, I imagine it's quite liberating. It
is. Yeah,
cool,
man.
Chris.
Thank you for this conversation, man.
Yeah, I hope it was good for you. It was a bit of a roller coaster ride because, I mean, your life it's taking some turns that I can't even comprehend.
I told you I had some stories, man. I was like, all right, you want to hear it? I have, dude, it's part of my program, man. I'll preach to the highest mountain of like the tribulations that I went through and all this stupid trial and error science that I had to do to figure it out. That hopefully if I can stop one person from making the same effing stupid mistakes that I did, then everything is worth it,
Hey, you have a BS in psychology, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever thought about pursuing anything along that front?
I have. The idea of going back to school for another couple of years is really scary to me because I finished my degree in my 40s and that was hard enough. And now I'm older and even less elastic and spongy as far as my brain goes. It's just not as fast. The recall and encoding doesn't work quite as well as it did. Like I was a whippersnapper when I was young. I could read a couple pages of notes and literally see those notes on a test. Like be like, oh, that answer? Yeah, that was on the bottom of that page. What were those 4 things again? Oh, you made an acronym for it. Oh, yeah. Now it's like, I don't know. And so the GRE scares the shit out of me a little bit too. I'm thinking maybe my wife's she's really working on her career right now. I got a really good job where I'm working. I'm thinking maybe get into like some chemical dependency counseling maybe later on when I can afford to like retire and just do that part-time because it doesn't pay a lot. And then I'll give my community service back that way. But right now, because of the stupid things that I did, I have to catch up on my retirement and savings because of all the dumb partying I did when I was in my 20s and stuff,
Yeah. Well, that's cool, Chris. Well, hey, I appreciate you doing this. When I interacted with you at the place, I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to ask him to be on the podcast because he seems like he's got some stories to tell. And yeah, you were certainly lighter when I met you, but I'm glad we got into some deep stuff. And if it helped to talk about it a little bit, then that's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of the hesitations that I had is that I don't have the energy of being behind a bar with a crowd that enlightens my mood and makes me like funnier, turns me into a bit more of the performance person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if I sold you short.
I wasn't asking you to perform. I was asking to have a real conversation with you. So I appreciate that.
All right, man. Cool.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.